I'd like to invite you to take part in this emptying prayer with me. It's one that is inspired by the imagery from 2 Corinthians 4, and that has helped me get through a lot of painful moments. It's difficult just to be a human being sometimes, just to feel ordinary and limited, and we are tempted to work harder to be something more than we are. But there's another option, and it's the option of emptying, of confronting the reality of our limitation and trusting that there is something else that we can reach out to in those feelings of being overwhelmed and anxious and limited. So enter into this reflection with me, this emptying prayer. If the imagery is helpful for you, keep your eyes open, but if you'd rather just be led through it and visualize it in your own head, then you're welcome to do that as well. So we'll begin by reading this passage from 2 Corinthians 4. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," made his light shine in our hearts, to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. Therefore we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. So let's begin by imagining a clay vessel of some kind. This is the shape that comes to mind for me. But what comes to mind for you? A jar of ordinary clay. Make this be who you are. Imagine yourself as this clay vessel, whatever shape it takes. And just sit with that for a moment. Take a deep breath. Be in this body, in this room, in this moment. Reflect for a moment on what it means to be this clay vessel that you are. How do you feel ordinary? How do you feel brittle or cracked? How do you feel limited in your capacity? What does it mean to live the life that you have been given with your gifts and your limitations, with your blessings and your burdens? How are you feeling right now about what this life requires of you and your capacity to handle it? Now let's imagine an inside view of this clay vessel. What is inside? What is making us feel full right now? Are we feeling overfull, overwhelmed with emotions, with concerns, with responsibilities, even overwhelmed with joys? What is it that's filling us up right now? Are we feeling overfull? What do we do to respond to that feeling? How do we try to respond to the feeling of not being able to hold all that we have been given to hold? So let's imagine now that inside these clay vessels of our own bodies and hearts and lives, we've cluttered them up with things to make us feel full. Imagine there are chunks of concrete, useless chunks of concrete, that really don't accomplish much, but which make us feel better because they take up space, because they make us feel more capable of handling the challenges of our lives. Take a moment to reflect on your own desperate efforts to feel enough, to feel full. What do you do when you feel anxious? What do you do when you feel out of control? Invite the Lord to show you these habits. How are you feeling unsure about the future right now, and how are you trying to scramble to know more, to control it? How are you wanting to control other people or relationships? What are you doing about that? Are there elements of your working life or your home life, your living arrangements, your daily routines that you're desperately trying to fix? What in your life makes you anxious? What in your life makes you feel out of control? Are there ways that your body feels out of your control? There are so many ways in which we can't control or fix or understand. What do we do out of our desperation in that moment? How do we just try to fill ourselves up with desperate efforts to fix, control, and understand? Name those chunks of concrete. And now I'd like to invite you to release those one at a time to the Lord. Hold them up, and one at a time invite Him to hold those. Confess the ways that you have tried to be enough, to fill yourself, and one at a time take each chunk of concrete, each desperate effort to fix, to control, to understand. Release them. Release them to someone who is bigger, who can hold them. Father, we ask you to take our fears, hold on to our desperate efforts to be more than we can be. We ask you to take the weight of what we are trying to carry. We confess that we have been anxious, that we've been trying to control and fix and understand things that are not ours to control, fix, and understand. And as we release these to you, God, we find ourselves empty. We find now these ordinary clay vessels are empty. We are not enough. We cannot do all we want to be able to do, to stay on top of everything in our lives and in the world. And this emptiness could be shameful. It could feel naked, or it could feel honest, swept clean, ready for something different. And so take a deep breath and feel the emptiness, feel the freshness of what has now been released. And Father, we thank you for releasing us from the ways we have been trying to be more than we can be as ordinary clay vessels. And we invite you, God, to fill this space, be what we are longing for. And as we've been promised in this passage from 2 Corinthians, we have a treasure in these ordinary clay vessels. And when we were so filled up with chunks of useless concrete, we couldn't see that there was a tiny little puddle in the corner just waiting to be given more room. A small puddle of molten gold waiting. We have been given the Spirit. We have been promised God's presence within us. He doesn't come and go, although it feels like He does. But we have cluttered up the space with so many other things, with so many desperate efforts to be more than we can, our own feeble human efforts to be God, keep the actual presence of God cramped in a tiny corner, cluttered out by all the other things that we also reach out to be our gods. And now that we have released those, there is more space for this Spirit to fill. The voice which spoke creation into existence, which said, "Let there be light," also wants to fill us with its light, with its goodness, with its warmth, with its life. And so, Father, we invite you. We don't want you to be cramped in a tiny corner. We want you to fill. And now that we have released our own efforts to be God, we invite you, the living God, as you filled the body of Jesus, you also offer to fill our bodies, to do more in this world than he could have done alone, as he said so himself. And so we invite that living power, that unfading treasure, to fill, and may it seal up every crack in this dry vessel. Everything it touches bursts into life. If we could drink it, we would never be thirsty again. If we could eat it, we would never be hungry again. It brings new life to everything it touches. It brings hope. It brings freedom. It brings healing. It fills us. These ordinary clay vessels that somehow house a miracle, and the miracle of our partnership with him allows us to continue to be limited, human, and yet filled with something that makes no sense, filled to overflowing, not just for our own healing and hope and life, but to overflow from us so that we can walk around as ordinary people, as Jesus did, ordinary humans housed with something miraculous, the very living presence of the God who created the universe, walking around in these ordinary human bodies, giving us courage, giving us hope, giving us insight and wisdom, giving us peace that makes no sense, directing our paths, renewing our minds, healing our hearts and our relationships, giving us words of comfort to speak, giving us courage to go to places, to give things, to share, to speak when we'd rather be quiet. And others will be able to see something at work in us which makes no sense, because they will see ordinary people and they will know something remarkable is at work, that God's power will be made perfect in our weakness, and we will continue to feel weak. We will continue to feel small, but we will, over time, as we get used to this emptying and this inviting of God's power, we will become more attuned to this discomfort of our own limitation, of our own weakness, as we invite the power of God to be made perfect in that weakness, and embrace this possibility that we have the treasure of his unfading glory in these jars of clay. Father, we thank you that you long to partner with us in this way. Let us empty of everything that gets in the way. Let us allow you to fill us and heal us, and give us life, so that it overflows from us in miraculous ways that make no sense, that the power of God is made visible through ordinary humans like us.